To you by TorahAnytime.com.
Take your medicine.
Sharaim Tov. Today is class number 70 about Judaism. Yesterday we ended up with the beginning of a discussion of the Shalosh Shvuos, the three oaths, based on a Gemara in Ksuvos, as that one of the oaths is that Shelo Yalu Yisrael B'choma, the Jews should not, during the exile, go up like a wall to go en masse. Another one is that we don't rebel against the non-Jews of the world. And the third one was an oath for the non-Jews that they should not subjugate the Jews more than is necessary. So now the question became, whether, even if you would say, let's say, establishing the state was going against the oaths. The question now is, once the state's up, maintaining it, does it go against the oaths? And we ended the class with Rav Hershel Schachter, who said that the prohibition of the creation of the state, even if that was part of the oaths, is not prohibited in maintaining it after it's established. And he says that's the overwhelming majority of rabbinic authorities say that. But when you look at his article and you look at the sources only brings down the Stipler, Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky, as a source for that. And from his sefer, Karyana de Igarta. So the question is, first of all, what about all the other overwhelming sources? So I guess, I don't know, I never spoke to Rav Schachter. I guess maybe he felt if you brought the Stipler, who's very Haredi, and if he agreed it's not a problem, then I guess everybody else would say it's okay. That might be why he did that, I don't know. But anyway, let's take a look at the actual responsa of Rabbi Yaakov. Remember, this is Reb Chaim's father. Okay, so and I believe the Stipler died somewhere in around 1980 or so, give or take a couple of years. And this article by Rav Schachter was written in 1988.
10 a.m.
So I know there's a little bit of Hebrew here that's challenging, but it's not a lot. And the title is very important of the responsa, because without the title you could totally be misled. The title is Im Yesh Bebechiros, with the Israeli elections. In other words, voting in the Israeli elections. Iser Mitzad Gimel Shvuos. Is there a prohibition of violating the three oaths if you're a Haredi who votes in the election? You're only voting, that's all you're doing. But is that in agreement to what's going on? And is that violating the three oaths or not? So, and the question was asked in light of the fact that the questioner said, we know the Satmar Rav holds that if you vote in the elections, you have violated the three oaths. So if the Satmar Rav says you have violated the three oaths, what do you have to say about it? This is after the state's been established, and it's there. Now the questioner asked, well, the Satmar Rav says it's prohibited because of the three oaths to vote. What do you say? So he says, Iker Tainis Ha'admar Rav HaKodesh Misatmar Shli, to the main point of the Satmar Rav to say you can't vote is Machmas Gimel Shvuos, because three oaths ain't a moving Lani Yisdaiti. I don't understand that, why that would be a problem. And according to me, Bevadai B'tchila Ha'yishalo Kedin, certainly establishing the state was certainly a violation of the three oaths. Aval Achsho, but now She'ein Shilton Acher, but now that there's no other government, Luchura Leke Isser Mitzada Gimel Shvuos, there is no prohibition of the three oaths. Now, let me ask you the question. Let's see how you would see this. What did the Stipler say? What did he say and what did he not say? It's not a trick question here. What would you say he said?
He said, once the state's been created, then you can vote.
You can vote. What did he not say? Did he say anything about the fact that the existence of the state is still a violation?
He didn't comment on that.
He didn't comment on that because that wasn't the question.
Right. Is
it possible the state's existence could be a violation?
You still feel that way.
But voting would not be a violation? Is that possible?
I think so.
Okay, that's all. Enough going further.
Okay.
You gave me the very simple reading of what's going on over here.
I'm a simple person.
Okay, well, that's good. Sometimes you have to be very simple. Okay, so now Rav Schachter deduced from here that what the Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetz was saying is that there's no more oaths anymore once the state was created. That's what Rav Schachter deduced from that. So that is totally... Now, if you didn't have the title, then you're not sure what... Remember, when in these Shas, they don't ever put the questioner's question in. A lot of times they just have the answer. So it's important to know what the question is. Without the title, you might say, well, the Satmarov says there's a violation of 3 oaths. It means...
Otherwise, you're just playing Jeopardy. You've got the answer and you have to come up with a question.
Right. So it's that, but that wasn't... The question wasn't, is the state violating the 3 oaths? The question is, if I vote in the election, have I violated the 3 oaths? And the questioner said, well, the Satmarov says you violate if you do that. What do you say? And he said, no. But that was the only question. But now, Rav Schachter, in his expanded, article, he was saying once the state exists, there's no prohibition of the 3 oaths. It's the overwhelming position. And look, on the footnote, I'll give you a proof. It's from the Stipler. So that was not the question. The question was voting, right? And that was a specific question. Regarding that question, the Stipler said voting does not violate the oaths. And the understanding is, he didn't say it, but the understanding is obvious because, Agudas Yisrael also said you could vote. And once the state was there. And they explained why. Because voting has no impact on the state's existence. Once the state is here, voting for one candidate over another doesn't constitute an act of creating or maintaining a Jewish state in Golos. The Jewish state will exist anyway if you vote or if you don't vote. It doesn't mean you're agreeing to the fact that there's a state. No different than if you're voting in an American election, you're voting because that's the only way I can get my voice heard. That's it.
You need funding for education.
Exactly. So all you're deciding is which candidate will be elected to the office in the already existing state. But the state's existence remains unaffected regardless of who wins the election. Therefore, that does not violate the oaths. Okay? And this has nothing to do with whether, you should be dismantling the state according to the 3 oaths. Even if it be required, voting still would not violate the oaths. And even if you're going to say that the oaths have been violated because the state is here and those who are maintaining the state are violating, but voting has nothing to do with my affirmation. If there be a vote, let's say, should we keep the state or what do you call it, take it apart?
Like a referendum.
Then you'd have to vote maybe to take it down.
Right.
Okay, but that's not what the vote's about. Now, this is what Reb Reuven Grazotsky said. That was the common position of Agudas Yisrael. And they said, you can vote, it doesn't violate the oaths at all, and therefore you could even, and then this question can be part of the Knesset. That's another discussion over there. And now, the only reason the Stipler mentioned the fact that the state was already established is saying because voting has no impact. That's what he's saying. If you look carefully, that since they shouldn't have done, but now that it's here, he didn't mean to say now that it's here, there's no violation of 3 oaths here, but now that it's here, the voting isn't going to make a difference. That was mistake number 1. Yeah?
So, for instance, from independence, if there would have been a religious government, religious party in power till now, so these 3, it would be...
That, if there would have been a religious government, it's still not clear if the oaths would not have been enforced. That's still another issue. Now, the second mistake is that the Satmarov never said such a thing to begin with, which means nowhere does he say if you vote in the Israeli elections, you have violated the oaths. He has a long list of prohibitions you do violate if you vote, but he didn't mention that one. He didn't mention that one. So what happened is the person who told the Shaila to the Stipler misquoted the Satmarov. Satmarov never said that. And if you want, I don't know if I put it down over here. No, it's, one second. Yes, if you look in source number 6, if you look what the Satmarov says, he doesn't say you've transgressed. He says, voting in the Israeli election caused one to become a partner in all the sins committed by the government. Okay? And you're a partner in that the government is sinning, but not that you are violating it. In other words, you're enabling them to do it, but that's not that you are actually violating. Let's say, example, someone's a Nazir. He asks you for wine. You give him the wine. Did you violate the thing of drinking wine? No, you enabled. So the Satmar said he never said you're violating the oath by voting. You're just enabling it. That's not violating. And therefore, but the questioner just said, well, the Satmar says you transgressed the oath. So when they asked the Stipler says, I don't really see that you're violating the oath. Okay, so, and therefore, and that's why he says, very important little word over here, if you look back in the Hebrew, he says, now there's a country, lechora, it would appear. Why didn't he say it's not? Why did he say there is no violation? He said it would appear. Every word he would say, remember the Stifler, they don't write a lot of words. You should say, it's not. Why say, it would appear? You know why he said appear? In deference to the fact that he thought the Satmarov said it was a violation. So in deference to that. But in fact, that he never said that either. So the one issue, you can't blame Rav Schachter because he didn't know that the questioner made a mistake.
Right.
He just assumed the questioner asked the question properly. But the second mistake, it could be, again, what he saw. Maybe he didn't see the title. Maybe he only saw part of the words. Whatever. But that's clearly not the Stipler on it. So they're going to say, well, no, maybe that's just what the Mr. Empty Wagon has to say. And the Stipler maybe meant like Rav Schachter said. So the author of the Empty Wagon, he wrote a letter to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, the son. And he said, I want you to tell me, and surely the son knew a lot about the father, he said, I want you to tell me, what do you think your father meant? So look in number 5. Regarding what your father wrote in Kraina de Igarta, regarding the elections in Israel, that taking part of them does not violate the 3 oaths. Does he mean to say that after the establishment of the state, there's no longer any problem with the oaths? Since the oaths prohibit only creating a state, but do not prohibit its continued existence after it's already been established? Is that what he meant? Or does he mean to say that specifically voting does not constitute a violation of the oaths, since voting is not the cause of the establishment or the continued existence of the state, but the continued existence of the state is also a violation of oaths anyway? Reb Chaim wrote back, the second interpretation is correct, which means it could very well be the state is still violating it, but voting does not. So it's just an example that when you have somebody saying, well, the overwhelming majority say once the state's there's no violation of the oaths, you got to really do your research, and without that, there could be even honest mistakes. We're not saying it's dishonest. It could be with the information that you have. So there's more to research, and as a matter of fact, I think the author mentions that he asked about this, and he never got a response on that. Okay, fine.
Asked to the second?
No, I think Rav Schachter. I'm not sure if he put that in over here. I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't. Okay. Let up. Maybe it's in one of the footnotes. I don't quite remember. Anyway, now let's go on with the next issue over here. Now, one of the big spokesmen, one of the big poskim for the Dati Lumi, big Talmud Chacham, is Rav Shlomo Aviner. Many Shilas and Shuvas, and he was a national religious student of Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, and he wrote a whole kuntris, a number of essays, and it's called Kuntris Lo Yalu Kachoma. The kuntris, the journal is a good word. The journal on this prohibition of not going up like a wall. So, excuse me. So, in this kuntris, Rav Aviner tries to find a way to justify the creation of the state of Israel, even though it appears to be violating this decree of the 3 oaths, 2 of the oaths of there. So he gives 13 reasons why it's not a violation. So we're obviously not going to go through all 13 of them, but the author here goes through about 4 of them, I believe. And again, the point is it's a shift. We're not discussing the philosophy, you see. Can there be a Jewish state? Is Jewish nationalism a Jewish concept? Is there a concept to die for your land? We're not even going into that. The question is, there's a major problem. This whole idea of Zionism appeared to go against the oaths. Clearly, you don't go up en masse, and you don't go against the wishes of the non-Jews. So now the question is it possible to make a state without violating the oaths, as the Gemara says? So let's take a look at reason number 1, and we'll see how the author dismantles it completely. Now, again, there could be other scholars who will disagree with his dismantling, but again, you have to realize it's not so simple. And again, when lay people discuss this issue, it's a very emotional issue, and there's not a lot of people who are discussing it, from a calm, rational place. And therefore, if you really want it, if you really believe in it, well, then whatever you hear, it must be right. So here is reason number 1. The oaths only disallow the Jews from taking Eretz Yisrael if the non-Jews don't want them to. It says you can't rebel against them. But if the Goyim give them permission to, then they may. Right? We can't rebel against them. But what if they're letting you go? So that's one of the reasons it's not a problem. Well, how do we know the Goyim are letting us go? Well, it says the Balfour Declaration. That was permission. How was that permission? Because the British at the time were in control, or just about to be in control, and they say that the king looks favorably upon a place for Jews to live. So that's what they said.
And even the United Nations subsequently.
Well, yes. Well, we'll get to that.
What happens if the nations change their mind?
So that's an interesting point, Paul. We're not going to discuss it today, but that's a very interesting point. It's a good question, but it requires us to explain a lot more before your question can be even intelligently answered. But it's a very good point. So now that is the general. Again, that's not I wouldn't say that's a halachic point he's bringing. He's just saying, well, it looks like it's the goyim don't mind. Now, by the way, did anybody ask the Arabs?
You know what they said in Hebron?
Yes. What do you mean?
They didn't want us there.
They didn't want us there. So the question is, who are the goyim?
Right.
He's going to say, well, Britain had the mandate, whatever you want to say. They were in charge. Well, are they really? Is an interesting question. But anyway, then they bring a source from the Avnei Nezer, one of the great halachists who was in the, I believe, the end of the 1800s.
The British were the colonizers, right?
Yes, they were the colonizers. Yes, exactly. But anyway, so then he quotes the Avnei Nezer. Okay? And that's a source now, that the oaths only prohibit ascending with strength. Oh, now you have a posek who's saying, with strength. Therefore, strength is not needed. The oath of going up en masse is not violated. Okay, now he's quoting the Avnei Nezer. Now, in support of this, he cites a letter that was, by the way, unverified, that first appeared in a Zionist publication that claims that it was written by Reb Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, that the letter said that after the Balfour Declaration, the oath no longer causes us to fear the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael, which is now more in effect. So we have first Rav Aviner says, well, once you had the Balfour Declaration, and there's a supposed letter from Reb Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, which has not been verified, and the position of the Avnei Nezer. So the author here gives, I think, 5 reputations. Question? No. Refutation number 1. First of all, many disagree with the Avnei Nezer. He's one opinion. We discussed earlier, I don't know if we mentioned it a lot, but the Ramban says, okay, he's one of the Rishonim, that when Koresh gave the Jews permission to return to Eretz Yisrael after the destruction of the first base of Mikdash, only a small number of Jews went from Bavel because they had a prophecy that they should not yet return. Okay. No, I'm sorry. Only small Jews from Bavel, they had a prophecy that they should return. The ones from Bavel were told, if you go to Bavel, you'll return from Bavel. But those who didn't live in Bavel, and they didn't have the support of the prophecy to return, they didn't because they were afraid of violating the oath. That's what the Ramban says. Even though Koresh asked them to return. But only the Jews in Bavel had the prophecy. So it means even with permission to return, but the point being from the Ramban, only the ones that the Navi gave permission. But Koresh said everybody can go back. They just said we're not going back because of the oaths. And that's what Ramban says. The Maral also writes that not only are the oaths still binding even if we take Eretz Yisrael without force, but even if the Goyim force us to take Eretz Yisrael, we're not allowed to do it. And we have to even be willing to die and not go to Eretz Yisrael. We should rather die than violate the oaths. That's Maral.
And this doesn't mean individuals. This means as a nation.
Yes. Rabbi Yonasan Ivishitz and the Yefei Torah also clearly say that even a peaceful with permission ascent to Eretz Yisrael is prohibited according to the oaths. And even the Avnei Nezer that Aviner quotes in support of his case, as well as the letter of Meir Simcha, are still not enough of a support. Why? Because even according to the Avnei Nezer, he can't apply what the Avnei Nezer said in general to the actual facts that are on the ground. The Avnei Nezer wrote this well before the state of Israel was created. So even though first, for example, the Avnei Nezer only say the oath of going up en masse is not applicable if the ascent was peaceful and with permission. But other violations of the Chikas HaKetz of pushing the end of the Golus is still there. So even according to Avnei Nezer, it's still prohibited to create a sovereign state, even if it's done peacefully, due to the oath of not the Chikas HaKetz of pushing the envelope. And therefore, what it means is the Avnei Nezer was only talking about colonies, but not a state. Okay, so that's again not such a big proof. And the Minchas Elazar, the Munkat Rebbe, was questioned about the authenticity of. He questioned anyway the Avnei Nezer because it contradicts what the Avnei Nezer publicly said. It must have been as applying it to their times, so they feel it may have even been a forgery. And even if they were all authentic and everything else, it's still only a minority opinion. It's the Avnei Nezer against so many other opinions who say not like that. So when you usually paskin halacha, you go with the overwhelming majority, not the underwhelming minority. Yeah.
So that's why we make issue when only small people return from Babel. Why we always say why?
Well, because many more from Bavel could have come.
Because they got the prophecy that they could return.
Yes, and many of them didn't come. The ones in Bavel didn't come.
And they should
They should have come. They were given permission to come. Okay, because that was part of the prophecy. There's a prophecy they could come. That's a big difference. We have a prophecy, come back after 70 years, and Korah says you can come back. Well, then that's not a problem.
The Jews were dispersed all over because that's time.
Yes.
We can also apply this to the Jews coming out of Egypt. A lot of people did not want to come when they were allowed when Hashem said going to take you out, and they didn't come.
Yeah, but that's different. That's different. That was a redemption. That's not exactly the same story, but that's not the same. The third refutation, just be on the next page, is there's no opinion that says if some nations get together and vote the Jews should go to Eretz Yisrael, they can. The opinion says that if they can take Israel peacefully without resistance, then it wouldn't violate the oath. But guess what? That didn't happen. It was not peacefully. There was a major war in 1948 and 6,000 Jews were killed. Would you say the nations of the world were agreeable to it?
Certainly not the Arab nations.
In addition, even after the War of 48, there was a civil war in where the Arabs in Israel rose up to get rid of Zionism from the land. And the Arabs were the ones living in and around the land. They never gave us permission to take it. Other countries did. And the UN does not have the halachic status as the Sanhedrin Hagadol that can bind decisions. And that's for sure. And any Zionist can tell you that now, correct?
Yeah, for sure.
In any case, there's no comparison between Koresh, which was a peaceful ascent, okay, where Israel had, and they knew from the beginning, it would be a bloody war against the Arabs. How could you call that a peaceful ascent? And guess what? If the Zionists were weaker, they would never have been able to create a state. It depended on having a strong hand, so to speak. So you had to have a military force. So no opinion ever found or imagined such a thing. Not the Avnei Nezer, clearly not. Not the Meir Simcha. They were also like, if you could do it peacefully, then maybe not. And even that opinion was not accepted. Yeah, you know what, let me just finish this. If I have time, I'll get this, because two more points.
Find the question and listen.
Yes. Well, also, the Balfour Declaration never promised Zionists Palestine as a sovereign state. If you look at the Lashon, favorably of them to live there, didn't have a sovereign state. Reb Meir Simcha, he heard that England was going to allow expansion of the Jewish settlements in Palestine, allowing immigration and safety. Now, without the permission of England, this would have constituted a violation of the oaths. But it was only for that, nothing for more. It never was to make a state. But what happened in 1948 was a totally different story and has nothing to do with Reb Meir Simcha's comments, if they're true, of 1917. In addition to everything above, you have to note that when it came to a vote in the United Nations resolutions in 1947, whether to create the state or not, Britain abstained. Okay. Two more refutations. Number 5 is, what about subsequent to the Balfour Declaration? After World War II, the British said that they're relinquishing the mandate, at which point it goes to the international trusteeship, not a Jewish state. So regardless of what the Balfour Declaration or any partition plan said, at the time Israel created, Britain did not give permission for the creation. So what does the Balfour Declaration have to do with anything? And finally, it's the opinion of many historians that what induced the British to relinquish Palestine was what? The violent armed attacks of the Zionists, blowing up hotels and things like that. In reality, the Zionists got the land by force of arms, not only having to defeat the Arabs, but the British as well. Do you think the British wanted to have control of that area? Yeah. They said, let's get out of here. The Jews are making it impossible. So wouldn't you call that sort of a revolution? Wouldn't you kind of say it's sort of a rebellion against the nations? So for all those reasons, how can you say it was a very peaceful thing and the nations are very happy? Now we got time for your question.
So one might ask, About question.
Yeah.
All the miracles that Hashem did in 48 and subsequently.
Okay, that is another good topic of discussion.
Again, plant it.
And you don't have to plant it. It's in the next chapter, which is called Israel's Wars, Myths or Miracles.
I promise I didn't look ahead.
And secondly, since when in halacha do you let miracles paskin shilas?
Fair enough.
We talked about that before. Just because a miracle happens doesn't mean we paskin a shilah based on a miracle. It's a dangerous game to say what is Hashem saying. You know, and as I said in another class, it's a very dangerous game to play. You know why? Because you're going to play that game. Maybe we should play it today. And you know what? Not a lot of miracles on October 7th.
Yeah.
A lot of Jewish blood has died. Maybe it's a sign from God that we shouldn't do this. No one ever says that.
Netanyahu apologized.
No one ever says that, do they? Well, maybe that's a sign from God too. So we don't play that game. It's a dangerous game. Okay, we'll continue with more of the reasons why the oaths may or not be violated and the refutations of them.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com. This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Tzarayim Tov. Today is class number 71 in our series of Zionism and its relationship to Judaism. And last time we met, we discussed a kuntras from Rav Aviner, who discusses the ways to justify